Victor Romano had been my brother for 12 years. We'd buried bodies together, celebrated victories together, built an empire that stretched from the Brooklyn docks to the Tuscan vineyards. He'd held my hand when my wife Angela died of cancer, and he'd nodded solemnly when I put a bullet in my own son's head for treason. And now he was trying to kill me. The realization hit me like a knife between the ribs, cold and absolute. The boy's warning echoed in my skull. Asterisk bad men hiding in the walls asterisk, and I saw it all with terrible clarity. Victor's too smooth smile, his hand drifting toward his jacket, the way his eyes darted to the massive fireplace that hadn't been lit in 20 years. Call security, Victor said, his voice too calm, too practiced. The boy's clearly disturbed, probably traumatized by his father's death. His father's death, I repeated, and the words came out like gravel. The man I ordered killed for selling information to the Rossis. Victor's mask slipped. Just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. The flicker of triumph, the hunger that had been hiding beneath years of loyalty that I moved before he could. My hand shot out, grabbing his wrist, twisting it behind his back. The gun that had been inches from his jacket clattered to the marble floor. I drove my knee into his spine and felt him crumple beneath me, heard the gasp of air leave his lungs. Don Lorenzo, someone shouted from the crowd. One of my security men, his hand already on his weapon. Secure the room, I commanded. No one leaves. Check the walls. Every inch of them. Victor laughed beneath me, a wet, desperate sound. You're too late, old man. The walls are filled with death, and it's coming for everyone you love. Your granddaughter. Your precious little Chiara. Every single person in this room. I pressed harder, cutting off his words. You're going to tell me everything. Who put you up to this? How many men you've got? Every detail you've been hiding for the past 12 years. You'll never make me talk. Yes, I will. I glanced up at the crowd of 500 guests, their faces frozen in shock. New York's elite, the powerful and the corrupt, the people who'd eaten my food and drunk my wine and whispered my name with fear and respect. They were all potential hostages now, all pawns in a game I hadn't known I was playing. Chiara was at the far end of the ballroom, her white dress like a beacon in the chaos. She was staring at me with wide eyes, the same eyes I'd seen when she was 3 years old, learning to walk in my garden. I'd promised her father, the son I'd killed, that I would protect her. I'd failed her once by letting her family fall apart. I would not fail her again. Get my granddaughter to safety, I ordered, and 2 of my men moved instantly, flanking her, guiding her toward the side exit. This isn't over, Lorenzo. Victor shouted. They'll never stop. The Rossis own this city, and you're just an old man clinging to. The explosion ripped through the east wing before he could finish. I felt the shock wave through my bones, heard the screams of guests, the shattering of crystal and glass. But the ballroom itself was untouched. My men had swept the walls, found the hidden compartments, neutralized the bombs before they could detonate. The war had begun. I dragged Victor through the chaos, past the hysterical guests, the frantic security teams, the blood that was already pooling on the marble floor. He fought me every step of the way, but I was stronger, angrier, more desperate than I'd been in years. That the basement was my domain, a soundproof chamber that had witnessed the final moments of countless enemies. I threw Victor into the steel chair, the same chair I'd used on the Caruso brothers, on the traitors who'd thought they could outsmart me, on the men who'd laughed in my face until I'd made them scream. Victor laughed anyway, blood trickling from his split lip. You really don't see it, do you? You were always so sure of yourself, so convinced that loyalty was something you could buy. Loyalty is earned. You earned it, Victor. 12 years of it. What changed? Your son changed. His eyes gleamed with something terrible. The one you killed. He reached out to me from the grave, Lorenzo. He told me everything. My blood turned to ice. Matteo, my firstborn, my pride, my greatest failure. I'd loved him more than life itself, and I'd killed him when I discovered he was selling information to the Caruso family. 15 years ago, I'd put a bullet in his head and told myself it was justice. What could Matteo possibly tell you from the grave? That you killed the wrong man. Victor's voice was soft, savoring each word. Matteo wasn't the traitor. He was investigating a leak in your organization, and he'd traced it to the highest levels. To the person who's been bleeding you dry for years. Who? Guess, Lorenzo. You're so good at reading people. Guess. I grabbed his throat, my fingers pressing against his windpipe. I don't play games, Victor. Your new maid, he choked out. Maria. I released him like he was made of fire. That's absurd. She's a widow. A mother. She's been with me for 6 months, Lorenzo. 6 months since her husband died. 6 months since she walked into your household, grief-stricken and desperate, looking for work. And in that time, how much has your organization lost? How many shipments have gone missing? How many men have turned up dead? The numbers flashed through my mind. Millions in lost revenue. Dozens of trusted soldiers killed in ambushes. And always, somehow, the enemy knew exactly where to strike. She's working for the Rossis, Victor said. Her husband was their man. When you killed him, they reached out to her. Gave her a choice. Work for them and get revenge, or die alongside her husband. She chose revenge. Enzo, I breathed. The boy mentioned his father. He knew something. Enzo is a pawn. A tool. The boy's been programmed to be the perfect spy. He watches everything, reports everything, and no one suspects him because he's just a child. He was the one who told me about the bombs in the walls. Wasn't he? He was supposed to give you a warning that would send you to the East Wing, where the real explosives were. I felt like I was drowning. A child. A child had been used as a weapon against me. A boy who'd looked at me with such sorrow, such innocence, and had asked me a question that would haunt me until the day I died. Why harm good folks? He's not a good kid, Victor spat. He's a monster in training. Just like his mother. Just like you. No. A child can't be responsible for his parents' sins. Victor's laughter echoed off the concrete walls. You killed your own son for less than what that boy's done. And now you're going to let some maid and her brat destroy everything you've built. I turned toward the door, my mind racing. I'm not finished with you, Victor. But I have a stop to make first. Where are you going? To talk to a maid about the meaning of loyalty. Maria's quarters were in the servants' wing, a small room that smelled of lavender and cheap soap. She was kneeling beside a cot, whispering in Italian to her sleeping son, her voice barely audible over the distant chaos of the ballroom above. When she sensed my presence, she turned, and the look on her face was not fear. It was resignation, as if she'd been expecting me, Don Lorenzo. She rose slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. I thought you'd come. Your son warned me, I said. He told me there were bad men in the walls. But he was just doing what you told him, wasn't he? Maria's face crumpled. He doesn't know? Enzo doesn't know anything. He's just a boy who hears voices in the walls and thinks they're ghosts. I never meant for him to be part of this. Part of what? Maria, the plot to destroy everything I've built. Part of the plot to avenge my husband. Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. You killed him, Don Lorenzo. You killed the father of my child, and you told me it was justice. But it wasn't. My husband was innocent. Your husband was a courier for the Rossis. He was an informant for the FBI. Her words hit me like a physical blow. He was working undercover to bring down the families. The Rossis were the ones who turned him. They threatened to kill Enzo if he didn't work for them, and he had no choice. When you killed him, you killed a good man who was trying to protect his family. You expect me to believe that. I expect you to believe that my husband's ghost has haunted me every day since you murdered him, she said. I expect you to understand that I had no choice. The Rossis have my mother. They have my sister. They told me I had to get close to you and feed them information, or they'd kill everyone I love. And what about Enzo? What about your son? Maria's sobs grew louder. They told me he'd be safe. They promised. But Victor told me there was a way to end it all. He said if I helped him kill you, he'd help me get my family back. He said it was justice. I looked at the sleeping boy, his small hand clutching a stuffed rabbit with one button eye. He was so small, so fragile, and yet he'd looked at me with those ancient eyes and asked the question that had shattered me. Victor is in my basement bleeding on my floor, I said. Your family is still in the Rossi's hands, and your son is lying in that cot, dreaming of the day his mother stops crying. She collapsed to her knees, her hands clasped together. Please, Don Lorenzo, kill me if you must. I deserve it. But let my son live. Let him grow up without the weight of his mother's sins. I looked at her, this woman who had tried to destroy me, and I saw something I hadn't expected. I saw myself. 15 years ago, I'd been faced with a similar choice. Protect my family or protect my empire. I'd chosen my empire. I'd killed my own son, and I'd spent every day since wondering if the blood on my hands would ever wash away. This woman had chosen differently. She'd risked everything to save the people she loved, and the only thing she'd accomplished was to lose them all. Get up, I said as she looked at me, confusion in her tear-streaked eyes. What? I said, get up. You're going to help me get your mother and sister back, and then you're going to help me destroy the Rossis once and for all. Don Lorenzo, I'm not forgiving you, I said. I'm not forgetting what you did. But I'm a practical man, and you have something I need. Inside knowledge of the enemy's operations. You're going to use that to help me take them down, and in exchange, I'll give you a chance to make things right. And Enzo, I looked at the sleeping boy again. His face was peaceful in a way that didn't belong in a world like ours. He'd seen his father killed, been groomed as a weapon, been used as a pawn in a game he didn't understand. And yet he'd looked at me with those ancient eyes and asked me why the good folks got hurt. Enzo is innocent, I said. I won't punish a child for the sins of his parents. But he's been exposed to things no child should ever see. From now on, he'll be protected, shielded. He'll grow up in a different world than the one you've been living in. Maria fell to her knees again, but this time, she didn't weep. She bowed her head and whispered a prayer of gratitude. That's not necessary, I said. Save your prayers for the ones who need them, the ones still trapped in the walls. I left her there, my mind racing with plans and counterplans. The Rossis had made a mistake. They'd shown their hand, revealed their traitor, and now I had the leverage I needed to destroy them. But as I climbed the stairs back to the chaos of the ballroom, I couldn't stop thinking about the boy. About the question he'd asked me. The question that had cut through decades of numbness and left me raw and bleeding. Why harm good folks? Because the world was full of monsters, and sometimes the only way to stop them was to become one yourself. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't the only way. The ballroom was in chaos when I returned, security teams sweeping the room, guests being escorted to safety. Chiara was gone, safely tucked away in a panic room I'd had installed after her birth. My men were dealing with the aftermath of the explosions, containing the damage, securing the perimeter, but one face was missing from the chaos. Where's Enzo? I demanded, grabbing one of the guards by the arm. The maid's son. Where is he? The guard's face went pale. I don't know, Don Lorenzo. He was with his mother, and then what? He wandered off. We haven't been able to find him. My blood ran cold. In the chaos of the attack, in the chaos of Victor's betrayal, the boy had slipped away, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he was in terrible danger. The Rossis hadn't just used Maria as a spy. They'd used Enzo as bait. The boy was their insurance policy, their guarantee that Maria would keep feeding them information. And now that the plot had failed, they had no reason to keep him alive. I moved through the estate like a demon, searching every room, every corridor, every shadowed corner. The servants' quarters were empty. The kitchens were empty. The garden was empty. And then I heard it. A small voice, barely audible over the distant sirens, coming from the east wing, the part of the estate that had been destroyed in the explosions. Enzo. I shouted, my voice cracking with a fear I hadn't felt in decades. Enzo, where are you? I'm here, Mr. Lorenzo. I found him in a ruined room, surrounded by debris and smoke. He was crouched in a corner, his stuffed rabbit clutched to his chest, his face smudged with soot. But he was alive, unharmed, and he was staring at something with wide, ancient eyes. What are you doing here? I demanded, scooping him into my arms. You were supposed to stay with your mother. There's a man in the wall, Enzo said, his voice calm. He's sleeping, but I think he's going to wake up soon. I followed his gaze and saw it. A hole in the wall, hidden behind a fallen bookshelf, leading to a crawlspace. And in that crawlspace, the body of one of Victor's men, unconscious but still breathing. He'd been the last of the bombers, the one who'd been supposed to detonate the East Wing. But he'd been trapped in the collapse, knocked unconscious before he could complete his mission. If Enzo hadn't found him, he would have woken up, set off the explosives, and killed everyone in the East Wing, including himself. I stared at the boy in my arms, this child who'd been used as a weapon, a pawn, a tool of vengeance. And I realized that he was something else entirely. He was a survivor, a protector, a little boy who'd seen the monsters in the walls and had decided to fight them. Enzo, I said, my voice rough. You saved us again. I just wanted to help, he said, his voice small. Mama says you're trying to be good, so I'm trying to be good too. And in that moment, in the ruins of my estate, surrounded by smoke and death and the wreckage of my empire. I felt something crack in my chest that I pulled the boy close, holding him tight, and I whispered a promise I'd never made to anyone before. I'll keep you safe, I said. You and your mother. I'll destroy everyone who threatens you. I'll burn the Rossis to the ground and scatter their ashes to the wind. No one will ever hurt you again. Enzo looked up at me, his eyes bright with a wisdom that didn't belong in a child's face. I know, Mr. Lorenzo, he said. That's why I told you about the bad men. Because you're the only one who can stop them. I carried him out of the ruins, through the chaos, past the bodies of the fallen and the wailing of the injured. And in that moment, I knew that everything had changed, that the boy had given me a gift I didn't deserve. A reason to fight. A purpose beyond the blood and the violence. And I would spend the rest of my life trying to repay him. That the Rossis had made a terrible mistake. They'd targeted the one person who could unite my enemies against them. They'd threatened a child who had become my reason for living. And now, they would pay. I gathered my men in the war room, my inner circle, the soldiers who'd survived the night. Victor was in the basement, his fate sealed. Maria was with her son, safe for the moment. And Chiara was tucked away in a panic room, protected from the chaos. But the war was just beginning. Hit them hard, I said, my voice cold. Hit them fast. I want every Rossi safe house destroyed, every asset frozen, every soldier dead. I want their leaders brought to me alive, so I can make them scream. My men nodded, their faces grim. They knew what was at stake. They knew that the old rules had been broken, that the Rossis had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. There's one more thing, I said. The boy who saved us tonight. Enzo. I want him protected at all costs. He's under my personal protection, and anyone who threatens him answers to me. The room fell silent. They knew what that meant. In the world of the mob, there was no greater honor and no greater danger. Don Lorenzo, one of my lieutenants, said, his voice hesitant. The boy is the son of a traitor. He's been used as a weapon against us. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. He's my responsibility now, and I protect what's mine. The men nodded, their hesitation gone. They'd seen what happened to people who questioned my decisions. They knew better than to push. And as I stood in the war room, surrounded by the men who'd sworn to follow me into hell, I made a vow to myself that I would destroy the Rossis. I would save Maria's family. I would protect the boy who'd saved my life and the lives of everyone in that ballroom. And I would answer his question once and for all. Why harm good folks? Because the bad men didn't understand what they were losing. They thought they could take and take until there was nothing left. But they were wrong. The good folks were the only thing that mattered. And they were worth fighting for. The war room fell silent as I laid out the plan. Maps covered the mahogany table, marked with red circles around every Rossi stronghold, every safe house, every legitimate business that served as a front for their operations. My lieutenants leaned forward, their faces grim, their hands resting on the weapons that had become extensions of their bodies. We hit them in 3 waves, I said, tapping the first circle. Supply lines first. Cut off their revenue, starve them of resources. Then their distribution networks, drugs, weapons, money laundering. Without those, they're just men with guns and nowhere to go. And the third wave, my Lieutenant Marco asked. I let the silence stretch, let them feel the weight of what I was about to say. The third wave is personal. I want their leadership. Alessandro Rossi, his sons, his consigliera. I want them brought to me alive. You're going to interrogate them? No. I'm going to make them watch as I burn everything they've built to ash. And then I'm going to kill them slowly. The men nodded, their faces hard. They'd seen me do worse. They knew I meant every word. But as the meeting broke up and the men filed out to execute their orders, I found myself alone with the weight of what I'd just set in motion. The Rossis had been a thorn in my side for decades, a rival family that had grown fat on the scraps I'd left behind. But I'd never gone after them with this kind of ferocity. I'd never had a reason. Now I did. The boy's face flashed through my mind. Enzo, with his ancient eyes and his simple question. He'd seen the monsters in the walls, and he'd come to me, trusting me to stop them. I couldn't let him down. I couldn't let any of them down. Maria was waiting for me in the garden when I emerged from the war room. The sun was rising over the estate, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was beautiful, in a way that felt almost obscene after the violence of the night. Don Lorenzo, she said, her voice trembling. I heard what you're planning. The attack on the Rossis. You're going to war. Yes. Then I want to help. I looked at her, this woman who tried to destroy me just hours ago. She was still in her maid's uniform, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. But there was something else in her expression now, something that looked almost like hope. You've done enough? I said. Go be with your son. I can't just sit here while you risk your life for my family. I'm not doing it for your family, I said, and the words came out harsher than I'd intended. I'm doing it because the Rossis crossed a line. They threatened my granddaughter. They tried to destroy my empire. And they used a child as a weapon. Enzo, she whispered, yes. Enzo, that boy has more courage than half the men in this organization. He looked at me with those eyes and asked me why good folks get hurt. And I couldn't answer him. So instead, I'm going to make sure they don't get hurt anymore. Maria's face crumpled. I never meant for him to be part of this. I never meant for any of it. I know. But you made your choices, and now we all have to live with them. The question is, what are you going to do now? She took a deep breath, steadying herself. I'm going to help you. I know the Rossi's operations. I know their patterns, their weaknesses, their safe houses. I can give you information that will save your men's lives. Information you should have given me months ago. Information I was too afraid to give, she admitted. But I'm not afraid anymore. After what Enzo did last night, after seeing him risk his life to save people he didn't even know, I realized that I can't keep living in fear. It's time to fight back. I studied her for a long moment, searching for any sign of deception. But all I saw was a woman who'd been broken and was trying to piece herself back together. Fine, I said. You'll work with Marco. He's leading the intelligence division. But if you betray me again, I won't. She met my eyes, and there was steel in her gaze. I swear on my son's life. Good. Because if you do, I'll kill him too. And I'll make you watch. I said it to test her, to see if she'd flinch. But she didn't. She just nodded, accepting the threat as the price of her redemption. Go get some rest, I said. You'll need your strength. She turned to leave, then paused. Don Lorenzo Enzo asked me something this morning. He asked me if you were going to be okay. What did you tell him? I told him that you're the strongest man I've ever known, and that you always find a way to protect the people you care about. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. The attack on the Rossi supply lines began 3 days later. My men struck in coordinated raids, hitting their warehouses, their distribution centers, their shipping routes. The streets of Brooklyn ran red with the blood of their soldiers, and the city's underworld trembled at the sudden, brutal violence of my response. But the Rossis were not weak. They fought back with a ferocity that surprised even me. They hit my operations in Queens, killing a dozen of my men and burning a warehouse to the ground. They assassinated 2 of my capos, their bodies dumped in the East River as a warning. The war was escalating, and the body count was rising. I spent those days in the war room, directing operations, analyzing intelligence, planning the next move. Maria worked beside me, her knowledge of the enemy's operations proving invaluable. She knew their safe houses, their meeting places, the patterns of their leaders. She'd been their weapon, and now she was turning that weapon against them. But it was Enzo who kept me grounded. The boy had become a fixture in my life, a constant reminder of why I was fighting. He'd wander into the war room, his stuffed rabbit under his arm, and ask me questions that cut through the noise of battle. Mr. Lorenzo, are you winning? Not yet, I'd say. But I will. Will the bad men hurt Mama again? Never. I'll make sure of it. He'd nod, satisfied, and wander off to find his mother. And I'd go back to planning the destruction of my enemies with renewed determination. That one evening, as the sun set over the estate and the latest reports of casualties came in, I found Enzo sitting alone in the garden. He was staring at the sky, his rabbit clutched to his chest, and there was a sadness in his expression that broke my heart. Enzo, I said, sitting down beside him. What are you doing out here alone? Thinking, he said. Mama says thinking is important. She says I should always think about my choices before I make them. That's good advice. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to me with those ancient eyes. Mr. Lorenzo, do you think my papa is in heaven? The question hit me like a physical blow. I'd killed the man. I'd ended his life with a bullet to the head, believing it was justice. And now his son was asking me if he was in heaven. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know much about heaven. Papa said good people go to heaven. He said bad people go to the other place. Enzo was quiet for a moment. Then he added, I don't want you to go to the other place, Mr. Lorenzo. Why not? Because you're trying to be good. That's what you told me. You said you're trying to be good. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I'm trying, Enzo. But I've done bad things. Really bad things. I know. He nodded solemnly. Mama told me. She said you've hurt a lot of people. But she also said you're trying to change. And that's what matters. Your mother is a very wise woman. She's the smartest person I know. Enzo said, his voice filled with pride. She told me that everyone makes mistakes, but the important thing is what you do after. And you're doing good things now, Mr. Lorenzo. You're saving people. You're saving Mama and me. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. I'm going to save your grandmother too, I said. And your aunt. I'm going to get them back, and I'm going to destroy the people who took them. I know, he said, his voice muffled against my chest. I knew you would. That's why I told you about the bad men. The second phase of the attack was more brutal than the first. My men hit the Rossi's distribution networks, cutting off their supply of drugs and weapons. They burned their money-laundering fronts, seized their assets, and left their soldiers scrambling for resources, but the real target was Alessandro Rossi himself. The old man had been a ghost for years, hiding behind layers of security and paranoia. But my intelligence, fed by Maria's knowledge and my network of informants, had finally pinpointed his location. He was hiding in a safe house in the Catskills, a remote compound surrounded by forest and guarded by a small army of soldiers. It was the perfect fortress, impossible to breach without overwhelming force. But I had overwhelming force that the assault was planned for the night of the full moon. My men would approach from 3 directions, cutting off any escape routes. Snipers would neutralize the perimeter guards, and I would lead the final charge, walking through the gates to face Alessandro Rossi myself. Maria begged me to let her come. I need to see his face when he dies, she said, her voice fierce. I need to see the man who destroyed my family fall. Your family is still alive, I reminded her. Your mother and sister are still out there. I need you here, coordinating the rescue teams. Don Lorenzo, I won't risk you, Maria. You're too valuable. And your son needs you. She fell silent, her face white. She knew I was right. But I could see the hunger in her eyes, the need for vengeance that mirrored my own. Promise me one thing, she said. Promise me you'll make him suffer. I will, I said. I'll make him suffer more than he's ever suffered in his life. I'll make him beg for death. That's all I ask. The Catskills compound was a fortress, but it wasn't impenetrable. My men moved through the forest like shadows, their boots silent on the damp earth. The snipers took out the perimeter guards one by one, their bodies crumpling without a sound. And then I was through the gates, walking through the courtyard with my men behind me. The Rossi soldiers were caught off guard, their defenses overwhelmed by the sudden assault. The sounds of gunfire echoed through the night, punctuated by screams and the crunch of breaking glass. Alessandro Rossi was in the main house, surrounded by his remaining guards. He was an old man, older than me, his face lined with decades of scheming and violence. But I saw fear in his eyes as I walked through the door. Genuine, primal feared, Lorenzo, he said, his voice trembling. You're too late. I've already won. Won what? Your empire is gone. Your men are dead. Your granddaughter. The sound of my gunshot echoed through the hall. The bullet struck his leg, and he crumpled to the ground, screaming. Where is my granddaughter? I'll never tell you. You'll have to kill me first. Gladly. I knelt beside him, pressing the barrel of my gun against his forehead. Last chance, Alessandro. Where is my granddaughter? She's in a room at the top of the stairs. I was keeping her as leverage, in case things went wrong. You should have killed her when you had the chance. Because now, I'm going to destroy everything you've ever loved. I shot him in the other leg, then the shoulder, then the arm. I made him suffer, just as I promised Maria. And when he was finally dead, when his body lay broken on the marble floor, I walked through his mansion and found Chiara in a room at the top of the stairs. She was unharmed. They hadn't touched her. They'd been keeping her as a bargaining chip, a guarantee of my compliance. But their plan had failed, and now she was freed. Grandfather, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I knew you'd come. I embraced her, holding her tight, and for the first time in years, I felt something other than rage. I felt love that the rescue of Maria's family was the final piece of the puzzle. My men found her mother and sister in a Rossi safe house in New Jersey, thin and frightened, but alive. They'd been kept as leverage, just as Maria had feared. When I brought them to the estate, Maria collapsed to her knees, weeping with relief. Enzo ran to his grandmother, his rabbit forgotten, his small arms wrapping around her neck. "Grandma," he said, his voice breaking. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, my little one," the old woman said, her voice rough with tears. "I missed you so much." I stood back, watching the reunion, and I felt a strange emotion I couldn't quite name. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was something deeper, something that felt almost like peace. "Don Lorenzo," Maria said, approaching me with tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," I said. "Just promise me you'll take care of your family. Protect them. Never let them be used as weapons again." "I promise," she said. "I swear on my life." "Good." I turned to leave, but Enzo ran after me, grabbing my hand. "Mr. Lorenzo, are you going to be okay?" I knelt down to his level, looking into those ancient eyes. "I'm going to be just fine, Enzo, because I have people to protect. People worth fighting for. Like me, like you," I said. "And your mother, and your grandmother. Everyone who's ever been hurt by the bad men." He smiled, a small, fragile thing, and I knew that I had been given a second chance. A chance to be something other than the monster the world had made me. "Why harm good folks?" Enzo asked, his voice barely a whisper. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. "Because the bad men don't understand what they're losing," I said. "They think they can take and take until there's nothing left. But they're wrong. Good folks are the only thing that matter, and they're worth fighting for." Enzo nodded, his face pressed against my chest. "Then you should keep fighting," he said. "For all the good folks. Forever." "I will," I said. "I promise." And in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of my enemies and the hope of a new beginning, I knew that I would keep that promise. The bad men were still out there. The shadows still lurked in the corners of the world. But I had found something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. And I would spend the rest of my life making sure the good folks never got hurt again. The victory over the Rossis should have been the end of it. Should have been the moment I could finally put down my weapons, step back from the bloodshed, and focus on the people who mattered. But in this life, there is no end. There is only the next threat, the next betrayal, the next shadow creeping out of the walls. I learned that lesson 3 weeks after the Catskills raid. When Marco came to me with news that turned my blood to ice. "Don Lorenzo, we've got a problem." His face was pale, his hands shaking as he laid a folder on my desk. "The FBI has been building a case against us. They've got informants inside our organization. They know about the Rossis, the hits, the money laundering. Everything." "How did this happen, Victor?" Marco said, his voice bitter. "He's been feeding them information for months. Not just about the Rossis, about us. Our operations, our safe houses, our people. He's been playing both sides, trying to position himself as the survivor no matter who won. Victor, the man I'd trusted for 12 years. The man I'd left bleeding in my basement while I went to war with the Rossis. I'd been so focused on the external threat that I'd forgotten about the snake in my own house. Where is he now?" "Still in the basement. We've kept him alive, like you ordered. But the FBI is closing in. They've got enough evidence to put half our organization away for life." I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. The Rossis were destroyed, but their legacy was still poisoning me from beyond the grave. Victor had been their tool, their inside man, and now he was the FBI's tool as well. "Give me a list of everyone he's compromised," I said. "Everyone who's been in contact with him. Everyone who might have been turned." "Already working on it," Marco said. "But there's something else. The boy, Enzo. Victor's been feeding the FBI information about him, too." "What kind of information?" "About his father. About the undercover work. About how the Rossis used the kid as a spy. The FBI thinks Enzo might be a valuable witness. They want to question him. Over my dead body. Get Maria and Enzo to the safe house," I ordered. "The one in the Hamptons. No one knows about it except you and me. I want them there within the hour. Don Lorenzo, if we move them now, the FBI will know we're onto them. Let them know. I don't care. That boy is not going to be dragged into this. He's been through enough." Marco nodded, his face grim, and left to execute my orders. I sat in the silence of my study, staring at the folder on my desk, and I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me. Victor. The Rossis. The FBI. It was all connected, all part of a web that had been spun around me for years. And I'd been too blind to see it. The Hampton safe house was a fortress disguised as a beach house, surrounded by miles of pristine coastline and protected by state-of-the-art security. I'd bought it years ago as a retreat, a place where I could escape the chaos of my life. Now it was a prison for the people I was trying to protect. Maria didn't complain when I told her they had to leave. She just nodded, her face pale, and started packing. Enzo, though, was different. Mr. Lorenzo, why do we have to go? Because there are bad men who want to hurt you, I said, kneeling down to his level. And I need to keep you safe. I'm not scared of bad men, he said, his voice fierce. I'm not scared of anything. I know you're not. But your mother is scared. And your grandmother. And I need you to be brave for them. Can you do that? He nodded, his chin set with a determination that broke my heart. I can do that. I'll protect Mama and Grandma. I won't let anyone hurt them. That's my boy, I said, pulling him into a hug. That's my brave boy. I watched them leave, Maria clutching her mother's arm, Enzo holding his rabbit in one hand and his mother's hand in the other. They looked so fragile, so vulnerable, and I felt a surge of rage at the people who'd put them in this position. Victor was going to pay for this. The FBI was going to pay for this. Everyone who'd ever threatened the people I loved was going to pay. I returned to the city the next day, determined to finish what I'd started. Victor was still in the basement, still alive, still bleeding from the wounds I'd inflicted. He was weak, broken, but his eyes still held that mocking gleam. You're too late, Lorenzo, he said as I entered. The FBI has everything. Your empire is finished. Maybe, I said, but I'm not finished with you. I approached him slowly, my footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. He flinched as I came closer, and I felt a grim satisfaction at the fear in his eyes. Tell me about the FBI, I said. Every agent you've talked to. Every piece of information you've given them. Every deal you've made. Why would I do that? You're going to kill me anyway. Death can be quick, I said. Or it can be slow. Very, very slow. The choice is yours. Victor's eyes darted around the room, searching for escape. But there was none. He was trapped, helpless, and he knew it. Fine, he said, his voice cracking. I'll tell you, but you have to promise me something. I don't make promises to traitors. Promise me you'll protect my family. My wife, my kids. They had nothing to do with this. They don't even know what I've done. I'll protect them, I said. But only if you tell me everything. He talked for hours, spilling secrets I'd never suspected. The FBI had been building their case for years, using Victor as their inside man. They knew about the Rossis, the Carusas, the entire structure of my organization. They'd been waiting for the right moment to strike, and Victor had been giving them that moment. But there was more. Victor had been working with someone else, someone inside my organization who was still a threat. Someone who'd been feeding him information, helping him orchestrate the betrayal who I demanded. Who's the inside man? I don't know, Victor said, his voice desperate. I've never met him. We communicated through dead drops, encrypted messages. He knew everything about your operations, your movements, your weaknesses. He's been playing you for years. And you have no idea who he is. I have a theory, Victor said. But I need something in return. Tell me. Protect my family. Promise me you'll protect them. I've already promised that. Tell me who it is. Victor took a deep breath, his eyes meeting mine. I think it's your granddaughter. The world stopped. I stood there, frozen, my mind refusing to process the words. Chiara, I finally managed. That's insane. She's 17 years old. She's been in my care since she was a child. She would never. She didn't know what she was doing, Victor said quickly. The Rossis got to her. They threatened her, manipulated her, turned her against you. She's been feeding them information for months. She didn't understand what she was doing, but she did it anyway. Where is the evidence? In the safe at the Rossi compound. I kept copies of everything. Documents, recordings, photos. It's all there. I turned and walked out of the room, my mind reeling. Chiara, my granddaughter. The girl I'd raised since she was a baby, the girl I protected with my life. She'd betrayed me. Or had she? Victor was a liar. He'd proven that over and over again. But the look in his eyes was different now. He wasn't gloating. He was begging. I found Marco in the war room, reviewing the latest intelligence. We have a problem, I said. Victor says Chiara is the inside man. He says she's been feeding the Rossi's information for months. Marco's face went pale. That's impossible. She's your granddaughter. She loves you. Victor had copies of the evidence in the Rossi compound. I need you to go there, find the safe, and bring everything back. I need to know if it's true. Don Lorenzo, if it is true, then I'll deal with it. Just find the evidence. Marco nodded, his face grim, and left to execute my orders. I sat alone in the war room, staring at the walls, and I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. Chiara, the girl I'd loved more than anything in the world. The girl I'd killed her father to protect. If she'd betrayed me, if she'd been working with my enemies, everything I'd done had been for nothing. The evidence arrived 2 days later. Marco brought it to me in a locked briefcase, his face unreadable. I opened it in my study, spreading the contents across my desk. Documents. Photos. Recordings. All of them damning. All of them proving that Chiara had been meeting with Rossi operatives, feeding them information about my operations, my movements, my weaknesses. And there was more. A recording of Chiara's voice, young and frightened, explaining why she'd done it. They said they'd kill him if I didn't help them. They said they'd make it look like an accident. I didn't know what else to do. Him. She was talking about me. She'd betrayed me to protect me. I sat back in my chair, staring at the evidence, and I felt the anger drain out of me. It was replaced by something worse. Grief. Guilt. Regret that I'd killed her father for betraying me. I'd raised her as my own, given her everything, protected her from the darkness of this life. And I'd failed her. I'd been so focused on protecting her from my enemies that I'd forgotten to protect her from herself. Chiara, I said, my voice barely a whisper. What have you done? I found her in her room, staring out the window at the garden below. She turned when I entered, and I saw the fear in her eyes. She knew why I was there. Grandfather, she said, her voice trembling. I can explain. You can explain. I held up the folder of evidence. I have everything here. Documents, photos, recordings. Everything you did. I did it to protect you, she said, tears streaming down her face. The Rossis said they'd kill you. They said they'd make it look like an accident. I didn't know what else to do. You could have come to me, I said, my voice harsh. You could have trusted me. I was scared, she sobbed. I was so scared. I didn't know who else to turn to. I felt my anger crack, replaced by something I couldn't name. She was just a child. A frightened child who'd been manipulated by my enemies. You should have told me, I said, my voice softer now. I would have protected you. I've always protected you. I know, she said. I know, and I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I love you, grandfather. You're the only family I have left. I crossed the room and pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. You're still the only family I have, I said. And I'm not going to lose you. Not to the Rossis, not to the FBI, not to anyone. We're going to get through this together. Promise, promise. We stood there, holding each other, and I felt something shift inside me. The rage, the hunger for vengeance, it was still there. But it was tempered now by something else. Love. Hope. The knowledge that I had people worth protecting. And I would do anything to keep them safe. The FBI was closing in, but I wasn't ready to give up yet. I gathered my inner circle, the men I trusted most, and laid out my plan. We're going to hit them before they hit us, I said. We're going to expose their operations, turn their informants, and make them look like the fools they are. Don Lorenzo, that's risky, Marco said. If the FBI catches wind of what we're doing, let them catch wind. By the time they figure out what's happening, it'll be too late. We're going to burn their entire case to the ground. My men nodded, their faces grim. They knew what was at stake. They knew that failure meant the end of everything we'd built. But I'd failed before. I'd failed my son, my wife, my granddaughter. I wasn't going to fail again. The attack on the FBI's informants was brutal and swift. My men hit their safe houses, their meeting places, their homes. They threatened their families, their friends, everyone they loved. And they made them a choice. Stop cooperating with the FBI, or face the consequences. Most of them chose to stop. The case against my organization crumbled, piece by piece. Witnesses recanted their testimony. Evidence disappeared. Agents were reassigned, their reputations destroyed by leaks and accusations of corruption. The Victor was still in my basement, still bleeding, still waiting for the end. I visited him one last time, his body broken and his spirit crushed. It's over, Victor, I said. Your case is dead. Your informants are gone. And you're going to spend the rest of your life in a hole no one will ever find. Just kill me, he said, his voice weak. Please, just end it. I'm not going to kill you. That would be too easy. You're going to rot in that hole, alone and forgotten, while I rebuild everything you tried to destroy." Victor closed his eyes, and I saw the last of his hope drain away. He was broken, defeated, and I felt a grim satisfaction at the sight. "You made a mistake," I said. "You thought you could destroy me. But you were wrong. I've survived worse. I've survived everything. And I'll survive this too." I left him there, in the darkness, and I walked out into the light. The estate was quiet when I returned, the chaos of the past few weeks finally settling. Maria and Enzo were back from the Hamptons, their family reunited, their lives slowly returning to normal. Enzo ran to me as I entered the garden, his arms outstretched. "Mr. Lorenzo, you're back." "I'm back," I said, scooping him into my arms. "Did you miss me?" "Lots," he said. "Mama said you were fighting bad men." "Did you win?" "I won," I said. "I won everything." He smiled, that bright, innocent smile, and I felt something warm spread through my chest. This was what I was fighting for. This boy, his mother, my granddaughter, the good folks who deserved a world without shadows. "I knew you would," he said. "I knew you'd win." "Thanks to you," I said. "If you hadn't warned me, I'd be dead." "You saved my life, Enzo." "I just wanted to help," he said. "Mama says you're trying to be good. So I'm trying to be good too." I set him down, kneeling to his level. "You are good," I said. "You're the best person I know." He blushed, looking down at his feet. "I'm just a kid. You're more than that. You're a hero, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." I stood up, looking out at the garden, at the people I'd saved, at the family I'd rebuilt. The bad men were still out there, the shadows still lurking in the corners. But I had found something worth fighting for. Something worth living for. And I would spend the rest of my life making sure the good folks never got hurt again. That the silence in my study was absolute, broken only by the steady tick of the grandfather clock that had belonged to my father. I sat behind my desk, the folder of evidence spread before me, and I felt the weight of everything I'd learned pressing down on my shoulders. Chiara had betrayed me, not out of malice, not out of greed, but out of fear. The Rossis had threatened to kill me, and she'd made a choice. The wrong choice, but a choice born of love. I couldn't fault her for that. I couldn't fault anyone for trying to protect the people they loved. But I could fault myself. I'd been so consumed by my empire, by the endless cycle of violence and revenge, that I'd forgotten what really mattered. Family, loyalty, the people who stood by you when everything else fell apart. I'd failed my son. I'd failed my wife. I'd failed my granddaughter. And now I was failing the boy who'd saved my life. That Enzo was the one who'd seen the monsters in the walls. He'd warned me, saved me, and asked me the question that had shattered everything I thought I knew about myself. Why harm good folks? He'd asked it with such innocence, such raw vulnerability, and I still didn't have an answer. But I was starting to understand. The bad men harmed good folks because they could, because they'd forgotten what it meant to be human, because they'd become monsters themselves, and monsters couldn't see the value of the people they destroyed. I was a monster. I'd always known that. But Enzo had shown me that I could be something else. Something more. I found Maria in the kitchen, her hands busy with a pot of soup, her face lined with worry. She turned when I entered, her eyes searching mine for answers I wasn't sure I had. "Don Lorenzo," she said. "Is everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "But we're getting there." "Chiara," she asked, her voice soft. "She's safe. She's confused and scared, but she's safe. I can't promise it will be easy, but she's going to be okay." Maria nodded, her hands stilling on the pot. "And the FBI dealt with. For now." I leaned against the counter, exhausted in a way I hadn't felt in years. "They'll be back. They always come back. But I've bought us some time." "What about Victor?" "He's where he belongs. In a hole no one will ever find." Maria was quiet for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she turned to me, her eyes filled with a sadness that cut me to the bone. "I never wanted any of this," she said. "I just wanted to protect my son." "I know. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything that happened to you and your family. I'm sorry for killing your husband. I'm sorry for the pain I caused." "You didn't know," she said. "You thought you were doing the right thing. That doesn't excuse it. That doesn't make it right." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't. But it makes it understandable. And understanding is the first step to forgiveness." I looked at her, this woman who'd had every reason to hate me, every reason to want me dead. And yet she was standing here, offering me a kindness I didn't deserve. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I said, maybe not, she said. But I'm giving it anyway. Because that's what Enzo would want. And because I've seen what you're trying to become. A better man. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I don't know if I can be that man, I said. I've done so many terrible things. You're trying. That's what matters. That's what Enzo sees in you. That's why he trusts you. And what do you see? She smiled, a small, fragile thing. I see a man who's been broken and is trying to put himself back together. I see a man who loves his granddaughter more than anything in the world. I see a man who's willing to fight for the people he cares about. That man, I said, is still a killer. Yes, she said, but that's not all he is. And that's what makes him different from the monsters. She reached out and took my hand, her fingers warm against my cold skin. You saved my family, she said. You brought my mother and sister back. You gave me my son. That's not the act of a monster. That's the act of a man who's trying to do the right thing. I squeezed her hand, not trusting myself to speak, that Enzo found us in the garden, chasing a butterfly with his stuffed rabbit held high. He was laughing, the sound so pure and joyful that it made something ache in my chest. Mr. Lorenzo, Mama, look, I'm going to catch it. Be careful, mi hijo, Maria called. Don't fall. I won't, he shouted, already running. That I watched him, this boy who'd seen so much darkness and still found a way to smile. He was a miracle, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. He's going to be someone special, I said. Someone who changes the world. He already has, Maria said. He changed yours. Yes, I agreed. He did. Enzo tripped on a root, tumbling to the ground with a cry. I started forward, but he was already up, brushing the dirt off his knees, his face streaked with tears, but his determination undimmed. Are you okay? I called. I'm fine, he shouted. I'm going to catch that butterfly. He ran off again, his small figure disappearing into the flowers. And I stood there, watching him go, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, that hope that the war wasn't over. It would never be over. The FBI was still circling, the underworld was still churning, and there were always new enemies waiting in the shadows. But for the first time in my life, I had something to fight for beyond my empire. That I had family. I had people I loved, and who loved me in return. And I would do anything to protect them. Chiara was waiting for me in my study when I returned, her face pale and her hands shaking. She was holding a letter, her eyes swollen from crying. Grandfather, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I found this. It was in the folder. I didn't know. What is it? I asked, taking the letter from her. That was from the Rossis. A demand, a threat, a promise. They'd told her that if she didn't cooperate, they'd kill me. They'd told her that if she told anyone, they'd kill everyone she loved. It was my fault, she said, tears streaming down her face. All of it. I should have told you. I should have trusted you. You were scared, I said. You were trying to protect me. That doesn't make it right. I betrayed you. I betrayed everything you've ever done for me. I crossed the room and pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. You made a mistake, I said. A terrible mistake. But you're still my granddaughter. You're still family. And I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. Grandfather. I mean it. I've lost too many people I loved. I'm not going to lose you too. She sobbed against my chest, her body shaking with the force of her grief. And I held her, just held her, the same way I'd held her when she was a child, when her mother died. When the world had seemed so dark and cruel. Everything's going to be okay, I said. I promise. We're going to get through this together. Promise, she whispered, promise. The days that followed were a blur of activity. I worked tirelessly to rebuild my empire, to shore up my defenses, to protect the people I loved. Marco was at my side every step of the way, his loyalty unwavering, his determination unshakable. But I also spent time with Enzo. More time than I'd spent with anyone in years. We'd sit in the garden, watching the birds, talking about everything and nothing. To Mr. Lorenzo, he'd say, why do the bad men keep coming? Because they don't know any better, I'd say. They think they can take what they want, hurt whoever they want, and nothing will happen to them. But that's wrong, he'd say. That's not fair. No, I'd agree. It's not. That's why we have to stop them. How do we stop them? I thought about it for a long moment. I'd spent my whole life stopping bad men. With violence, with fear, with blood. But Enzo had taught me that there was another way. We show them that good folks are stronger, I said. We show them that love is stronger than hate. That family is stronger than power. That hope is stronger than fear. Enzo nodded, his expression serious. Like how you're trying to be good. Exactly like that. He smiled, that bright, innocent smile, and I knew that I was doing the right thing. The final confrontation came on a cold November night, the kind of night that reminded me of the darkness I'd spent my life fighting. The FBI had regrouped, their case against me rebuilt from the ashes of Victor's betrayal. They were closing in, and they weren't going to stop until they had me behind bars. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not without a fight. I gathered my inner circle in the war room, the same room where we'd planned the attack on the Rossis. But this time, the plan was different. This time, I wasn't going to fight. I was going to surrender. Don Lorenzo, you can't be serious, Marco said. If you give yourself up, if I don't, they'll come after everyone I love. Chiara, Maria, Enzo. They'll use them as leverage. They'll destroy everything we've built. There has to be another way. There is, I said. I've already talked to my lawyers. I'm going to make a deal. Limited immunity for my family and organization in exchange for my cooperation. The FBI gets a big scalp, and we get a chance to start over. What about you? I'll do my time. I've earned it. The room fell silent, the weight of my decision settling over everyone. Marco looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew me well enough to know it was useless when he finally asked, tomorrow, I'm going to turn myself in at the federal courthouse. I want you to make sure everyone knows. I want it on the news. I want the world to see that I'm not running anymore. Don Lorenzo, that's an order. I want you to protect my family. Chiara, Maria, Enzo, and I want you to keep them safe until I get out. Marco nodded, his face grim. I'll do it. I'll protect them with my life. I know you will. That's why I trust you. I left the war room and walked through the estate, my footsteps echoing off the marble floors. The halls were empty, the servants dismissed for the night, the guests long gone. It was just me and the silence. And Enzo, he was waiting for me in the garden, his rabbit clutched to his chest, his eyes bright in the moonlight. He looked so small, so fragile, and I felt a surge of love so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. Mr. Lorenzo, he said, Mama said you're leaving. Just for a little while, I said, kneeling down to his level. I have to go away, but I'll come back. Promise, promise. Why do you have to go? I thought about lying to him, about making up some story to protect his innocence. But he'd been through too much, seen too much, to be shielded from the truth, because I did some bad things, I said. And now I have to make things right. Like when you killed my papa. I felt the words like a physical blow. Yes, I said, my voice rough. Like that. Enzo was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. Then he reached out and touched my face, his small fingers warm against my skin. I forgive you, he said. You didn't know. You thought you were protecting people. That's what you always do, right? Protect people. Yes, I said, tears streaming down my face. That's what I always do. Then it's okay, he said. You were trying to be good. You're trying to be good. That's what matters. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight, and I felt the last of my walls crumble. This boy, this child who'd been through so much, was giving me absolution I didn't deserve. I'm going to miss you, he said. I'm going to miss you too. But I'll write to you. Every week. And when I come back, we'll go fishing together. Would you like that? Yeah, he said, his voice muffled against my chest. I'd like that. I stood up, my hand on his shoulder, and I looked out at the garden where we'd spent so many hours together. It was beautiful, peaceful, a world away from the violence that had consumed my life. Enzo, I said, you asked me why harm good folks. I still don't have a good answer for that. But I think I understand now. The bad men hurt good folks because they've forgotten how to be human. They've forgotten what it means to love, to care, to protect. They're empty inside, and they try to fill that emptiness with power. Are you empty? He asked. Not anymore, I said. You filled me up. You and your mother and my granddaughter. You gave me something to fight for. He smiled, that bright, innocent smile, and I knew that I would carry that smile with me through the darkest days ahead. That I left the garden as the sun began to rise, the first rays of light painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Maria was waiting for me at the door, her eyes red from crying. Thank you, she said. For everything. Thank you, I said, for teaching me what it means to be human. She hugged me, a brief, fierce embrace, and then she stepped back. I'll take care of Enzo, she said. I'll keep him safe. I know you will. And I'll come back. I promise. I walked out the door and into the world I'd spent my life ruling. The sun was rising over the city, the sky bright and full of promise. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The FBI was waiting for me at the courthouse, cameras flashing, reporters shouting. I walked through the crowd with my head held high, my lawyers flanking me, my heart full of the love I'd found in the most unexpected place. And as I looked up at the courthouse steps, I thought of Enzo, the boy who'd saved my life, the boy who'd taught me what it meant to be good. I would do my time. I would pay for my sins. And I would come back, a better man, a man worthy of the trust he'd placed in me, because good folks were worth fighting for. And I would never stop fighting. The federal courthouse loomed before me like a monument to everything I'd spent my life avoiding. The marble columns, the stone steps, the brass doors that had closed on countless men who'd stood where I was standing now. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I'd spent my whole life running from this moment, dodging subpoenas, buying off judges, burying witnesses. I'd built an empire on the foundation of my invincibility, convinced that I was above the law, that I'd never face the consequences of my sins. But Enzo had changed that. The boy who'd looked at me with those ancient eyes and asked me the question that had shattered my soul. Why harm good folks? He'd made me see myself for what I really was. A killer. A monster. A man who'd spent his life hurting people and calling it justice. And now I was going to pay it. My lawyers flanked me as I climbed the steps, their faces grim, their eyes darting through the crowd of reporters and photographers. The cameras flashed, capturing every moment of my surrender, every step I took toward the doors that would close behind me. Don Lorenzo, a reporter shouted. Is it true you're turning yourself in? I didn't answer. I just kept walking, my head held high, my gaze fixed on the doors ahead. Don Lorenzo, who's going to run your organization while you're gone? No, answered Don Lorenzo. Do you have any regrets? That one made me pause. I turned to face the reporter, a young woman with sharp eyes and a microphone shoved in my face. Regrets. I had so many regrets I'd lost count, every single day, I said. Every single thing I've ever done. That's my regret. The crowd went silent, stunned by my admission. Then the questions came faster, more urgent, but I was done answering. I turned and walked through the doors, leaving the chaos behind. The inside of the courthouse was quiet, the marble floors polished to a mirror shine, the air thick with the scent of old paper and desperation. My lawyers led me to a conference room where the prosecutors were waiting, their faces stern, their files stacked high on the table. Lorenzo Castiglione, the lead prosecutor said, his voice cold. We've been waiting for this day for a long time. Then you've been waiting too long, I said, taking my seat. Let's get this over with. The negotiations took hours. My lawyers argued for leniency, pointing to my willingness to cooperate, my surrender, my agreement to testify against the remaining members of the Rossi organization. The prosecutors pushed back, demanding maximum sentences, public humiliation, the complete dismantling of my empire. In the end, we reached a deal. 15 years. No parole. Full cooperation with the FBI and the Department of Justice. My organization would be allowed to continue under the control of my lieutenants, provided they stayed within the bounds of the law. The agreement also includes protection for your family, the prosecutor said, sliding a document across the table. We've agreed to keep Chiara Castiglione's involvement out of the public record. As far as the world knows, she's just your granddaughter, an innocent victim of your crimes. I read the document carefully, my eyes scanning every line. It was all there. Everything I'd asked for. Everything I'd fought for. One more thing, I said. There's a boy, Enzo. His mother works for me. I want them protected. If anything happens to them, the deal is off. The prosecutor's eyes narrowed. The maid's son, the one who warned you about the bombs, yes. He saved my life. He saved hundreds of lives. I want him protected. Fine. We'll include them in the protection program. Good. Then we have a deal. I signed the documents, my hand steady, my heart calm. This was the right thing to do. The only thing to do. And then I was led away, down a long hallway, through a series of secure doors, to the cell that would be my home for the next 15 years. That the cell was small, barely big enough for a bed and a desk. But it was clean, well lit, and surprisingly comfortable. I'd expected worse. I'd expected a hole in the ground, a place to rot and be forgotten. But I wasn't forgotten. I had people who cared about me, people who were waiting for me to come home. The first letter came a week later. Enzo's handwriting was messy, his letters large and uneven, but I could see the care he'd put into every word. Dear Mr. Lorenzo, I miss you. Mama says you're in a place where you can't come home yet, but she says you'll come home soon. I told her I know you will. You promised. You always keep your promises. I'm being good. I'm helping Mama with the cooking and the cleaning. I'm taking care of Grandma. She's getting better. She smiles more now. I think she's happy. I'm happy too. But I miss you. I hope you're okay. I hope you're not too sad. Mama says you're a good man. I think so too. I caught a butterfly today. I let it go because you said that's what good folks do. They let things go. I think I understand now. You let go of bad things so you can be good. I'll write again soon. Your friend, Enzo. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. This boy, this child who'd been through so much, was still thinking of me, still believing in me, still hoping that I could be the man he thought I was. I wrote back that same day, my pen moving across the paper with a speed I hadn't known I possessed. Dear Enzo, thank you for your letter. It made me very happy. I miss you too. More than I can say. I'm glad you're being good. I'm glad you're helping your mother. She's a strong woman, and she needs all the help she can get. I'm glad your grandmother is getting better. She deserves to be happy. You write about letting go. That's what I'm doing here. I'm letting go of all the bad things I've done. I'm trying to become a better man, a man worthy of your friendship. I'm not sad. I'm actually happy, happier than I've been in years. Because I know I have people who care about me. I have people who believe in me. And that makes everything bearable. I'll write again soon. Keep being good. Keep catching butterflies. And remember, you're the bravest person I know. Your friend, Lorenzo. The letters became a lifeline, a connection to the world I'd left behind. Enzo wrote every week, his letters filled with stories about his life, his friends, his dreams. He told me about his grandmother's cooking, his mother's new job, his adventures in the garden. And I wrote back, telling him about my life in prison, my work with the FBI, my determination to become a better man. Time passed. The years blurred together, marked only by the letters that arrived every week without fail. Enzo grew older, his handwriting more sophisticated, his thoughts more complex. But he never forgot me. He never stopped writing. On my 10th year in prison, I received a letter that changed everything. Dear Mr. Lorenzo, I'm 15 now. Can you believe it? Time flies, Mama says. She's right. It feels like yesterday that I was chasing butterflies in the garden. I've been thinking a lot about what you told me. About good folks and bad folks. About why the bad men hurt the good ones. I think I understand now. It's because they're afraid. The bad men are so afraid of being hurt that they hurt everyone else first. They're so afraid of being weak that they pretend to be strong. They're so afraid of being human that they become monsters. But you're not a monster anymore. You were never really a monster. You were just a man who made mistakes. A man who was trying to protect the people he loved. I'm going to be a good man when I grow up. I'm going to protect people. I'm going to fight for them. Just like you taught me. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're not too sad. I hope you know that I'm proud of you. I know I'm just a kid, but I am. I'll write again soon. Your friend, Enzo. I read the letter over and over, the words blurring through my tears. This boy, this child I'd met in the chaos of my birthday party, had grown into a young man with a wisdom that belied his years, and he was proud of me. He was proud of me. I wrote back immediately, my hand shaking with emotion. Dear Enzo, you rewrite. The bad men are afraid. They're so afraid of being hurt that they hurt everyone else first. But that's not what makes them bad. What makes them bad is that they choose fear over love. They choose hate over hope. They choose darkness over light. And you're right about me. I was a monster, but I'm not anymore. I've changed. I've become the man I always should have been. I'm proud of you too. So proud. You're going to be a good man, Enzo. A great man. You're going to change the world. I can't wait to see you again. I can't wait to see the man you've become. Your friend, Lorenzo. The day of my release arrived faster than I'd expected. 15 years had passed, and I was a different man than the one who'd walked through those courthouse doors. I'd spent my time reading, learning, reflecting. I'd worked with the FBI, helping them take down the remaining criminal organizations that plagued the city. I'd made amends, in whatever small way I could. And now I was going home. I walked out of the prison gates, my eyes squinting in the bright sunlight. The world had changed in 15 years. The city had grown, the skyline different, the streets unfamiliar. But some things hadn't changed. Maria was waiting for me at the gate, her face lined with age but her eyes still bright. She rushed to me, throwing her arms around my neck, her body shaking with sobs. "You're back," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You're finally back." "I'm back," I said, holding her tight. "I promised I would. Enzo's waiting at the estate. He wanted to come, but I told him he should wait. He's so excited. He's been talking about you for weeks." "Where is he? Is he okay? Is he—" "He's fine," she said, pulling back to look at me. "He's more than fine. He's amazing. You'll see." The drive to the estate was surreal. The streets I'd once ruled were now foreign to me, the landmarks I'd known replaced by new buildings and new faces. But the estate was the same, the gates opening to reveal the garden I'd loved so much. And there, standing in the middle of the garden, was Enzo. That he was a young man now, tall and strong. His face no longer the face of a child, but the face of someone who'd seen the world and chosen to be good. He was holding his stuffed rabbit, the same rabbit he'd clutched as a child, but now it was a relic, a reminder of the boy he'd been. "Mr. Lorenzo," he said, his voice deeper but still filled with the same warmth. "You're back." "I'm back," I said, crossing the garden to stand before him. I promised I would. He didn't say anything else. He just dropped his rabbit and threw his arms around me, hugging me tight. "I missed you," he said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too," I said, holding him tight. More than I can say. We stood there in the garden, holding each other, and I felt a peace I'd never known. I was home. I was with my family. And I was finally the man I'd always wanted to be. "Come on," Enzo said, pulling back. "I have something to show you." He led me through the garden, past the flowers and the trees, to a small shed I'd never noticed before. He opened the door, and I saw what he'd been working on. It was a library. A small, beautiful library filled with books, pictures, and mementos. And on the wall, there was a picture of me, taken on the day of my surrender. Below it, written in Enzo's handwriting, were the words, "Why harm good folks?" "I've been thinking about that question my whole life," Enzo said. "And I think I finally have an answer." "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The answer is simple," he said. "Bad men harm good folks because they don't understand what they're losing. They don't understand that the good folks are the only ones worth protecting. They don't understand that love is stronger than hate. But I do. And that's why I'm going to spend my life protecting them. Just like you taught me." I pulled him into my arms again, holding him tight, and I felt the tears streaming down my face. This boy, this young man, had given me a gift I didn't deserve. He'd given me hope. He'd given me purpose. He'd given me a reason to be good. "Thank you," I said, "for everything." "Thank you," he said, "for teaching me what it means to be human." We stood there, holding each other, and I knew that my life had finally found its meaning. I'd spent my years as a monster, hurting people, destroying lives. But now I was something else. Something more. I was a protector, a guardian, a man who'd learned that the only thing worth fighting for was love. And I would spend the rest of my life making sure the good folks never got hurt again. But the estate felt different when I walked through its gates for the first time as a free man. The gardens were still there, the flowers still blooming, the trees still standing sentinel over the grounds. But everything seemed brighter, more alive, as if the world itself had been waiting for my return. Enzo walked beside me, his stride confident, his shoulders squared. He was 18 now, a young man on the cusp of adulthood, and I could see the boy he'd been in every line of his face. The same eyes, the same intensity, the same unshakable belief that the world could be made better. "I've been taking care of the estate," he said, gesturing toward the main house. "Mama helps, but she's been busy with her work. She opened a small bakery in the village. It's doing really well. Your mother always was a hard worker," I said. "She deserves to be happy." "She is," Enzo said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "We all are. Thanks to you." I shook my head. "I didn't do anything. I just made things right." "No, you did more than that. You gave us a chance. A chance to be safe, to be free, to be happy. That's everything." We reached the main house, and I stopped to look at it. The marble columns, the grand entrance, the windows that had seen so much over the years. It was still the same, but I wasn't. I'd changed. I'd become someone new. Chiara was waiting for me in the foyer, her arms crossed, her expression guarded. She was 32 now, a woman who'd built a life for herself despite the shadow of her past. She'd married a lawyer, had 2 children, and worked as a counselor for at-risk youth. She'd made something beautiful out of the wreckage of her childhood. "Grandfather," she said, her voice cool. "Welcome home." "Kiara," I said, approaching her slowly. "I've missed you." She didn't respond for a long moment. Then her composure cracked, and she rushed into my arms, sobbing against my chest. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry for everything." "There's nothing to forgive," I said. "You were a child. You were scared. I should have been there for you." "You were," she said. "You were always there. I just didn't know how to ask for help." I held her tight, feeling the years of guilt and pain drain away. This was what I'd been fighting for. This moment, this reconciliation, this chance to make things right. "I'm going to be here," I said. "From now on, I'm going to be here. For you, for your children, for everyone I love. I'm not going anywhere." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I know. That's why I'm not afraid anymore." The rest of the day was spent reconnecting with the people I'd left behind. Marco was still running the organization, his loyalty unwavering, his dedication absolute. He'd kept his promise, protected my family, and built a legitimate business empire that would outlast us all. "I'm stepping down," I told him that evening, as we sat in my study. "The organization is yours now. You've earned it." "Don Lorenzo, I don't want." "I know you don't," I said. "That's why you deserve it. You've been loyal, honest, and true. You've done everything I would have done, and you've done it better. The organization is in good hands." He was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. "What are you going to do with yourself? You've spent your whole life building this." "I'm going to live," I said. "I'm going to spend time with my family. I'm going to watch Enzo grow up. I'm going to help Kiara with her grandchildren. I'm going to be the man I always should have been." Marco nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Then you've earned that too. More than anyone I know." The weeks that followed were a blur of quiet happiness. I spent my days in the garden, reading, thinking, reflecting. I visited Maria's bakery, sitting in the corner with a cup of coffee and watching her work. I helped Kiara with her children, teaching them the things I'd never taught her. I built a life that wasn't about power or control, but about love and connection. And Enzo was always there. My constant companion, my friend, my reason for hope. "Can I ask you something?" he said one evening, as we sat on the terrace watching the sunset. "Anything." "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Why did you give yourself up? You could have fought. You could have won." "I could have," I agreed. "But winning would have cost me everything. My family, my friends, my soul. It wasn't worth it." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's what I thought. You chose us over yourself." "I chose love," I said. "It's the only choice that matters." He was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Then he turned to me, and I saw something in his face that took my breath away. "I want to be like you," he said. "I want to protect people. I want to make the world better. I want to be the kind of man who chooses love over power." "You're already that man," I said. "You've always been that man. Ever since you were a little boy, asking me why good folks get hurt." "I asked you that because I didn't understand," he said. "I didn't understand why the world was so unfair. But now I do. The world is unfair because people let it be. They're afraid to fight back, afraid to stand up, afraid to make a difference. But I'm not afraid anymore." "Neither am I," I said. "That's the gift you gave me." He smiled, that bright, innocent smile I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "Then we'll fight together. We'll protect the good folks. We'll make the world better." Together, I agreed. Forever. The years passed, and Enzo grew into the man I'd always known he'd become. He went to college, studying law and social work. He worked with at-risk youth, helping them find their way out of the darkness that had consumed him as a child. He became a voice for the voiceless, a champion for the forgotten. And I was there, every step of the way, watching him, supporting him, loving him. He was my redemption, my second chance, the sun I'd never been able to be. But the shadows never fully disappeared. The underworld still churned, the bad men still lurked in the corners. And one day, the past came back to haunt me. I was in the garden, reading a book, when Marco called. His voice was tense, urgent, the voice of a man who'd seen danger before. "Don Lorenzo, we have a problem. Victor Romano's people are back. They've been gathering strength, building an organization of their own. They want revenge. How did this happen? I asked, my blood running cold. Victor died in prison last year. But his lieutenants didn't. They've been biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now they've decided it's time. Where are they? They're everywhere. They've been targeting our businesses, our people. They've already killed 2 of our men. I felt the old anger surge back, the rage I'd thought I'd buried. But I pushed it down, forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't that man anymore. I couldn't be that man. Don't retaliate, I said. Not yet. Let me handle this. Don Lorenzo, they're going to kill us all. You have to let us fight back. No. There's been enough violence. Enough blood. I'll find another way. Marco was silent for a long moment, his frustration palpable. What do you have in mind? Let me talk to them, I said. Let me reason with them. You're insane. They'll kill you. Maybe, I said. But I have to try. I hung up the phone and sat in the garden, my mind racing. Victor's lieutenants were dangerous, unpredictable, fueled by years of hatred and resentment. They wouldn't listen to reason. They wouldn't stop until they destroyed everything I'd built. But I couldn't fight them. Not anymore. I'd spent my whole life fighting, and it had only led to more pain, more suffering, more death. There had to be another way. There had to be. Enzo found me in the garden, his face pale, his eyes wide. I heard what happened, he said. The attacks. Victor's people. Yes. What are you going to do? I'm going to talk to them, I said. I'm going to try to make peace. Make peace? They want to kill you. I know. But I have to try. It's the only way. He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he sat down beside me, his hand on my shoulder. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. This is too dangerous. I don't care, he said. You're not going alone. I won't let you. Enzo, you taught me to protect the people I love, he said. You're one of the people I love. I'm not going to let you walk into danger by yourself. I looked at him, this young man who'd grown up in the shadow of violence and chosen to be good. He'd spent his life fighting for the voiceless, the forgotten, the lost. And now he was fighting for me. Fine, I said. But you stay behind me. If anything happens, you run. I'm not running, he said. I'm not leaving you. The meeting was set for a warehouse on the edge of the city, the same kind of place where I'd conducted countless negotiations in my younger days. But this time, I wasn't coming as a mob boss. I was coming as a man who'd seen the darkness and chosen the light. Victor's lieutenants were waiting for us when we arrived, their faces hard, their hands on their weapons. I recognized some of them from the old days, men who'd served under Victor with a loyalty that had never wavered. Lorenzo Castiglione, the leader, said, a man named Salvatore. You have a lot of nerve showing up here. I came to talk, I said, to offer you a way out. A way out? Salvatore laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You killed our boss. You destroyed our organization. You took everything from us. And now you want to offer us a way out. I killed Victor because he betrayed me, I said. He tried to destroy my family. He tried to kill everyone I loved. I did what I had to do. And now we're going to do what we have to do. I raised my hands, showing I was unarmed. Listen to me. I've changed. I'm not the man I used to be. I don't want to fight anymore. That's convenient, Salvatore said, his eyes narrowing. You've changed now that we're a threat. I've changed because I had to, I said. I've spent 15 years trying to become a better man. I've helped people. I've protected people. I've tried to make things right. Good for you. That doesn't change what you did to us. No, I agreed. It doesn't. But it changes what I'm willing to do now. I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to give you a choice. What choice? You can walk away, I said. Leave this city. Leave this life. Start over somewhere else. I'll give you money, resources, whatever you need. You can build a new life, a better life. Or you can stay here, fight me, and die. The choice is yours. Salvatore was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. Then he laughed, a cold, empty sound. You think we're just going to walk away? You think we're going to forget what you did? I think you're smart enough to know when you're beaten, I said. I think you're smart enough to know that this fight will only end in death. And I think you're smart enough to want something better. The room was tense, the air thick with the promise of violence. I could feel Enzo's hand on my shoulder, his presence steady and strong. Give me the money, Salvatore said finally. Give me enough to get my people out of this city, and we'll disappear. I nodded, relief flooding through me. I'll have it sent to you tomorrow. You'll never hear from me again. Good, Salvatore said. Because if I ever see you again, I'll kill you. I don't care how much you've changed. I didn't respond. I just turned and walked out of the warehouse, Enzo at my side, the weight of the past finally lifting from my shoulders. That was amazing, Enzo said as we walked back to the car. You actually did it. You made peace. I made a deal, I said. It's not the same as peace, but it's a start. It's more than anyone else would have done. You saved lives tonight. You stopped a war. I looked at him, this young man who'd grown into a hero, and I felt a surge of love so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. I couldn't have done it without you, I said. You gave me the strength to be better. I just did what you taught me, he said. I chose love over fear. We drove back to the estate in silence, the city lights flickering in the distance. I'd spent my whole life fighting, running, surviving. And now, finally, I was free. Free from the past, free from the violence, free from the monster I'd once been. Enzo was my redemption, my second chance. And I would spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of his faith. That night, as I sat in my study, I thought about the boy who'd looked at me with ancient eyes and asked the question that had changed everything. Why harm good folks? I'd spent years trying to answer that question, trying to make sense of the senseless. And now I understood that the bad men harmed good folks because they'd forgotten what it meant to be human. But I hadn't forgotten. Enzo hadn't let me. And as I looked out the window at the garden where we'd spent so many hours together, I knew that my life had finally found its meaning. I was no longer a monster. I was a protector, a guardian, a man who'd chosen love over power. And I would never stop fighting for the good folks. Never. The warehouse meeting had bought us time, but I knew it wasn't peace. Salvatore and his men had taken the money and disappeared, but the hatred that had driven them wouldn't just vanish. It would fester, grow, find new ways to strike. That was the nature of this life. You could run from it, hide from it, even try to reform it. But it never truly let you go. I spent the weeks after the meeting in a quiet kind of vigilance. I didn't return to the old habits, the old paranoia, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. A storm on the horizon, invisible but inevitable. Enzo noticed. He always noticed. You're worried, he said one morning, finding me on the terrace with an untouched cup of coffee. I can see it in your eyes. I'm always worried, I said. That's what happens when you've lived my life. You think Salvatore will come back. I think men like Salvatore don't know how to let go. They hold on to their hatred because it's the only thing that gives them purpose. And sooner or later, that hatred will find a way to express itself. So what do we do? I looked at him, this young man who'd become the center of my world. He was 20 now, finished with college, working full-time at a legal aid clinic in the city. He'd dedicated his life to helping people who'd been crushed by the system, the forgotten and the voiceless. And he'd done it all without ever losing his compassion, his hope, his belief in the goodness of people. That was the gift he'd given me. That was the reason I'd been able to change. We prepare, I said. We make sure we're ready for whatever comes. But we don't become what they are. We don't let their hatred turn us back into monsters. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's what I've been trying to do with my work. Help people without becoming bitter. Protect them without losing myself. And how's that working out? It's hard, he admitted. Every day, I see people who've been broken by the system, by the violence, by the cruelty of others. It's easy to get angry. It's easy to want to fight back. But you don't. No, he said. Because I remember what you taught me. The bad men hurt good folks because they've forgotten what it means to be human. And the only way to stop them is to remember. I reached out and clasped his shoulder, feeling the strength in him, the goodness that had never been dimmed by all he'd seen. You're a better man than I ever was. I said. I'm the man you helped me become, he said. That's all. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks later. A shipment from one of Marco's legitimate businesses was hijacked, the drivers beaten, the goods stolen. It was a small thing, easily written off as a random act of violence. But I knew better. Salvatore's testing us, I said to Marco when he called. He wants to see how we'll react. What do you want me to do? Nothing. Don't retaliate. Don't even acknowledge it. Let him think we're weak. Don Lorenzo, if we don't respond, we'll respond in our own time, in our own way. But we don't give him the reaction he's looking for. Marco was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. You're right. I know you're right. But it's hard, sitting back while they attack us. Trust me, I said. I know. The attacks continued, small and scattered, always just enough to remind us that Salvatore was still out there. A warehouse fire, a truck hijacking, a threatening letter left at one of Marco's offices. Nothing that couldn't be explained away, nothing that demanded an immediate response. But I knew what he was doing. He was building a case, gathering evidence, waiting for the moment when he could strike without warning. And I knew that moment would come. Chiara came to me one evening, her face pale, her hands trembling. She'd heard about the attacks, the threats, the shadow that was creeping back into our lives. "Grandfather, I'm scared," she said. "I thought this was over. I thought we were safe." "I thought so too," I said. "But the past has a way of catching up with us. All we can do is face it. What if we can't? What if he wins?" I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. "He won't win, because I'm not going to let him. I've spent too many years fighting for this life, for this family, to let anyone take it away." "But you promised." "I promised I wouldn't become a monster again. And I won't. But that doesn't mean I won't fight. It just means I'll fight differently." She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to stop him," I said. "But I'm going to do it the right way. The way Enzo taught me." The plan came together slowly, carefully, over the course of several weeks. I worked with Marco, with my lawyers, with contacts I'd cultivated during my years in prison. I gathered evidence, built a case, prepared for the moment when Salvatore would finally show his hand. And then I waited. Salvatore struck on a cold December night, the kind of night that reminded me of the darkness I'd spent my life fighting. He'd gathered his men, his weapons, his hatred, and he'd come to the estate to finish what Victor had started. I was ready. I'd known he would come. I'd known he couldn't resist. And I'd prepared for it. He found me in the garden, sitting in the same spot where I'd spent so many hours with Enzo. I was alone, unarmed, waiting. "Lorenzo Castiglione," he said, his voice echoing through the darkness. "You're a fool to come alone." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not unarmed." He laughed, that cold, bitter laugh I'd heard before. "Where are your men? Where's your army? You're just an old man, sitting in the dark." "They're here," I said. "But you can't see them." Salvatore's smile faltered. He looked around, his eyes scanning the shadows. And then he saw them, my men, emerging from the darkness, their weapons trained on him and his soldiers. "Don't move," Marco said, his voice cold. "Don't even breathe." Salvatore's men froze, their hands in the air. I stood slowly, walking toward him, my heart steadied. "You thought you could come here, threaten my family, and walk away," I said. "You thought I was weak, that I'd forgotten how to fight." "You're not going to kill me," he said, his voice shaking. "You've changed. You're not that man anymore." "You're right," I said. "I'm not going to kill you." I pulled out a folder and tossed it at his feet. "But I'm not going to let you go either. That's the evidence I've gathered against you. Enough to put you away for life." Salvatore stared at the folder, his face pale. "You can't." "I can," I said. "And I will. You're going to prison, Salvatore. You're going to spend the rest of your life there. And while you're rotting in your cell, I'm going to be here, with my family, living the life you tried to destroy." "You can't do this to me," he said, his voice desperate. "I'll kill you. I'll kill everyone you love." "No, you won't. Because you're never getting out of prison. And even if you did, there's nothing left to fight for. Your organization is gone. Your men are gone. You're alone." He collapsed to his knees, his eyes filled with a rage that was finally, completely, defeated. And I watched him, this man who'd been consumed by hatred. And I felt something I'd never expected. "Pity." "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry you couldn't let go. I'm sorry you couldn't find a better way. But I'm not sorry for stopping you." I turned and walked away, leaving him to the authorities who were already closing in. The battle was over, the war finally won. And I was freed. Enzo was waiting for me in the house, his face pale, his hands shaking. "I heard everything," he said. "You did it. You stopped him." "I didn't stop him," I said. "I just made sure he couldn't hurt anyone else." "There's a difference." "Maybe," he said. "But it's enough. It's more than enough." I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. "We're safe," I said. "Finally, truly safe." "Thanks to you," he said. "Thanks to everything you've done." "No," I said. "Thanks to you. You're the one who taught me how to fight without becoming a monster. You're the one who saved me." He pulled back, his eyes shining with emotion. "I just asked you a question, Mr. Lorenzo. You're the one who answered it." We stood there in the silence, the weight of the past finally lifting. And I knew that my journey was complete. I'd faced my demons, confronted my enemies, and found a way to be good. The boy who'd asked me why the bad men hurt the good folks had become the man who'd shown me the answer. And I would spend the rest of my life proving that he was right. The months that followed were quiet, peaceful, the kind of peace I'd never known I could have. I spent my days in the garden, reading, thinking, enjoying the simple pleasures I'd spent my life ignoring. I visited Maria's bakery, watching her thrive, her smile brighter than I'd ever seen it. I helped Chiara with her grandchildren, teaching them the lessons I'd learned too late. And Enzo was always there. He'd moved into the estate, taking over the role I'd once filled, but in a different way. He wasn't a mob boss. He was a protector, a guardian, a man who'd chosen love over power. He'd started a foundation, using the money Marco had funneled into legitimate businesses, helping the people who'd been left behind by the system. "I'm proud of you," I said one evening, as we sat on the terrace watching the sunset. "I know I've said it before, but I need you to understand. You've become everything I hoped you'd be." "I had a good teacher," he said. "You had a good heart. That's what made the difference." He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Then he turned to me, and I saw something in his face that made my heart ache. "Mr. Lorenzo, do you think my father would be proud of me?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I'd killed his father. I'd ended a man's life, believing it was justice. And now his son was asking me if that man would be proud of him. "Yes," I said, my voice rough. "I think he'd be very proud." "How do you know?" "Because I know what it means to be a father," I said. "And I know that the only thing a father wants is for his child to be happy, to be safe, to be good. You've become all of those things. He would be proud." He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Thank you. That means a lot." I reached out and took his hand, holding it tight. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry for everything I did. For killing your father. For hurting your mother. For all the pain I caused." "You've already apologized," he said. "And I've already forgiven you. There's nothing more you can do. Then I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that forgiveness." He squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with a warmth that melted the last of my guilt. "You already are, Mr. Lorenzo. You already are." That night, I sat in my study, the darkness pressing against the windows. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I wasn't afraid of the shadows, the memories, the ghosts that had haunted me for so long. I was at peace. I thought about the boy who'd looked at me with ancient eyes, the boy who'd asked me the question that had changed everything. Why harm good folks? I'd spent years trying to answer that question, trying to make sense of the senseless. And now I understood that the bad men harmed good folks because they'd forgotten what it meant to be human. They'd forgotten that the good folks were the only ones worth protecting. They'd forgotten that love was stronger than hate, that hope was stronger than fear, that light was stronger than darkness. But I hadn't forgotten. Enzo hadn't let me die, and as I looked out the window at the garden, at the home I'd finally found, I knew that my life had found its meaning. I was no longer a monster. I was a protector, a guardian, a man who'd chosen love over power, and I would never stop fighting for the good folks. Never. The peace that settled over the estate in the months after Salvatore's arrest was unlike anything I'd ever known. It wasn't the uneasy calm of a temporary truce or the hollow silence that follows a battle. It was real, solid, the kind of peace that comes from knowing the fight is truly over. I woke each morning to the sound of birds in the garden, the smell of fresh coffee drifting up from the kitchen where Maria had already started her day. She'd retired from the bakery, passing it on to a young woman she'd trained, but she still couldn't sit still. She filled her days with cooking, gardening, and fussing over everyone who crossed her path. "You're spoiling them," I told her one morning, watching her pile plates of food onto the breakfast table. "They deserve to be spoiled," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "After everything they've been through, they deserve a little happiness." "And what about you? Don't you deserve happiness too?" She paused, her eyes meeting mine. "I have happiness," she said. "I have my son. I have my mother. I have a home. That's more than I ever thought I'd have." "And is that enough?" She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made her look years younger. "It's more than enough. It's everything." I nodded, understanding what she meant. I'd spent my whole life chasing power, wealth, control. I'd thought those things would make me happy, but they'd only made me empty. It was only when I'd lost everything that I'd found what really mattered. Enzo came down the stairs, his hair still wet from the shower, a folder tucked under his arm. He was always working now, always fighting for the people who'd been left behind. His foundation had grown, expanding to multiple cities, helping thousands of people escape the cycle of violence and poverty that had consumed his childhood. "Morning," he said, grabbing a piece of toast from the table. "I've got a meeting with the city council today. They're finally starting to take our proposal seriously." "What proposal?" I asked. "The one for the youth center. We've been trying to get funding for months. I think we're finally making progress. You're going to change the world, Enzo." He shrugged, but I could see the pride in his eyes. "I'm just trying to do what you taught me. Protect people. Give them a chance." I reached out and clasped his shoulder. "You're doing more than that. You're giving them hope." He smiled, that bright, innocent smile I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. I had a good teacher. The days settled into a comfortable rhythm. I spent my mornings in the garden, my afternoons helping Maria with her projects, my evenings with Chiara and her children. The grandchildren had become the light of my life, their laughter filling the halls of the estate with a joy I'd never known. Little Lorenzo, named after me, was 6 years old, with the same dark eyes as his mother and a mischievous grin that reminded me of Enzo. He'd taken to following me around the garden, asking questions about the flowers, the birds, the world. "Grandpa," he'd say, tugging on my sleeve, "why do the flowers grow?" "Because they want to," I'd say. "Because they want to be beautiful. Like us, exactly like us." He'd nod, satisfied, and run off to chase the butterflies that flitted through the garden. And I'd watch him go, my heart full to bursting. But the past has a way of lingering, of casting shadows over even the brightest days. It came back to me in the form of a letter, delivered by hand on a cold January morning that I was in my study when Marco brought it in, his face pale, his hands trembling. "Don Lorenzo, you need to see this." I took the envelope, my name written in a hand I didn't recognize. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind used by people who wanted to make an impression. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. Lorenzo, I know what you did. I know everything. The evidence, the deal, the lies you told to put my father away. You think you've won. You think you're safe. But you're not. I'm coming for you. I'm coming for everyone you love. And this time, there won't be a deal. There won't be a choice. Just death. Sincerely, Vittorio Romano Vittorio. Victor's son. The boy I'd promised to protect, the boy I'd sworn to keep safe from the consequences of his father's sins. He'd been 15 when Victor went to prison, a scared kid who'd lost everything. I'd sent him money, protection, everything I could to give him a chance and now he was coming for me. "Where did this come from?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "Delivered by a courier this morning," Marco said. "No return address. No way to trace it." I set the letter down, my mind racing. Vittorio had been planning this for years. He'd been biding his time, building his resources, waiting for the moment to strike. And now that moment had come. "Get me everything you can on Vittorio Romano," I said. "His whereabouts, his connections, his movements. I need to know what we're dealing with." "I've already started," Marco said. "But Don Lorenzo, there's something else. Vittorio's not working alone. He's been meeting with Salvatore's people, the ones who got away. They're building an organization, a big one. They've been recruiting, training, getting ready." "How long have you known about this?" "I only found out yesterday. I was going to tell you, but then the letter came." I sat back in my chair, the weight of the past pressing down on me. I'd thought the fight was over. I thought I'd finally found peace. But the monsters never really went away. They just waited, regrouped, and came back stronger. "What do you want us to do?" Marco asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "I need time to think. Don Lorenzo, if Vittorio is coming for us, we need to be ready. We need to." "I know what we need," I said, my voice sharp. "But I'm not going to become the man I used to be. Not for anyone. Not even for him." Marco nodded, his face grim. "I understand. But we can't just sit here and wait for him to strike." "Then we don't wait. We reach out to him. We try to reason with him." "Reason, Don Lorenzo. He's Victor's son. He grew up hating you. He's not going to listen to reason. He has to. Because if he doesn't, everyone loses." The days that followed were a blur of activity. We tracked Vittorio's movements, mapped his connections, analyzed his patterns. He was smart, methodical, careful. He'd learned from his father's mistakes, built an organization that was lean and efficient. He was a ghost, invisible and untouchable. But I knew one thing he didn't. I knew his father. I knew the fear and hatred that had driven Victor, the choices he'd made, the path he'd taken. And I knew that Vittorio was following the same path, making the same mistakes that the first attack came a week later. A bomb went off at one of Marco's warehouses, killing 2 guards and destroying millions of dollars in inventory. It was a statement, a warning, a promise of worse to come. This has to stop, I said to Marco, my voice grim. I'm going to find him. I'm going to talk to him. You don't even know where he is. He's been hiding. I know where he is, I said. He's at his father's old house, the one in Staten Island. He's been living there for months. Marco stared at me. How do you know that? Because I've been watching him. The same way he's been watching us. I left the estate that night, alone, unarmed. I knew it was dangerous, reckless, possibly suicidal. But I had to try. I had to reach Vittorio before it was too late. That the house was dark when I arrived. The windows shuttered, the doors locked. It was the same house where Victor had raised his family, the same house where he'd plotted his revenge. And now his son was carrying on that legacy, trapped in the same cycle of hatred and violence. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened, and I came face to face with Vittorio Romano. That he was young, barely 30, with his father's sharp eyes and his mother's gentle features. He was holding a gun, his hand steady, his face a mask of cold fury. Lorenzo Castiglione, he said. You have a lot of nerve showing up here. I came to talk, I said. To offer you a way out. A way out, he laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You killed my father. You destroyed my family. And now you want to offer me a way out. I killed your father because he was trying to kill me, I said. He was trying to destroy my family. I did what I had to do. And now I'm going to do what I have to do. He raised the gun, aiming it at my chest. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, this young man who'd been consumed by hatred. And I felt something I'd never expected, pity. Your father was a good man, I said. He was loyal, brave, and dedicated to the people he loved. But he made mistakes. He let his hatred consume him, and it destroyed him. You're lying. I'm not. I knew your father better than anyone. We were brothers for 12 years. We fought together, bled together, built an empire together. And in the end, he chose revenge over everything else. He chose to destroy himself. Vittorio's hand trembled, the gun wavering. You're just trying to talk your way out of this. Maybe, I said. But that doesn't make what I'm saying any less true. Your father was a good man who made bad choices. And now you're making the same choices. You're following the same path. And you're going to end up in the same place. He was trying to protect his family, just like you were. Yes, I said. He was. And I've spent the rest of my life trying to make up for the things I did to protect my family. I've changed, Vittorio. I'm not the man I used to be. People don't change. Yes, they do. I'm living proof. And you can too. You can walk away from this. You can build a new life, a better life. You don't have to be defined by your father's choices. The gun was still pointed at me, but I could see the doubt in Vittorio's eyes. He was torn, caught between the hatred he'd been raised with and the truth I was offering him. What about my father, he asked. What about the years he spent in prison, the years he suffered, the years he lost? I can't give those back, I said. I can't undo the past. But I can help you build a future. I can give you the money, the resources, the support you need to start over. All you have to do is walk away. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on mine. Then he lowered the gun, his shoulders slumping, the fight draining out of him. Get out of here, he said. Before I changed my mind. I nodded, turning to leave. But I paused at the door, looking back at him. If you ever need help, I said. If you ever want to talk, I'll be there. I promise. He didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at the floor, his gun hanging limply at his side. That I walked out into the night, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. I'd done it. I'd reached him, made him see, given him a chance. But as I drove back to the estate, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, that the war was still coming, and that no amount of talking could stop it. Enzo was waiting for me when I got home, his face pale, his eyes wide. I heard what you did, he said. You went to see him. Alone. I had to. You could have been killed. I know. But I had to try. He shook his head, his jaw tight. You're insane. You're absolutely insane. Maybe, I said. But I did what I had to do. I gave him a chance. And what if he takes it, then we win. Without firing a single shot. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. Then he reached out and pulled me into a hug, holding me tight. I don't know what I'd do without you, he said. I don't know who I'd be. You'd be the same man you are now, I said. The man who chose love over hate. The man who showed me what it means to be human. He pulled back, his eyes shining. We're going to get through this, he said. Together. Together, I agreed. Always. The days after my meeting with Vittorio were filled with a tension I hadn't felt in years. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every sound seemed to signal an attack. I'd done what I could, offered him a way out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. That the hatred that had consumed his father was too deeply rooted to be pulled out by a single conversation. Enzo noticed my restlessness. He'd always been able to read me, to see through the masks I'd spent a lifetime perfecting. He found me in the garden one afternoon, staring at the flowers without really seeing them. You're worried about him, Enzo said, sitting down beside me. Vittorio. I'm worried about what he might do, I admitted. I saw the hate in his eyes. It was the same hate I saw in his father's eyes, the same hate that drove Victor to destroy himself. I thought I could reach him, but I'm not sure I did. You gave him a choice. That's all anyone can do. Sometimes choices aren't enough. Sometimes people choose the wrong path, no matter how many chances they're given. Like you. I turned to look at him, startled by the question. What do you mean, you had choices, he said. You could have stayed in prison, let the hatred consume you, become bitter and vengeful. But you didn't. You chose to change. You chose to be better. That was different. I had people who believed in me. People who gave me a reason to change. And you gave Vittorio a reason. You offered him hope. It's up to him what he does with it. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words. He was right, of course. He was always right. But knowing that didn't make the waiting any easier. The weeks passed, and Vittorio remained silent. There were no more attacks, no more threats, no more signs that he was planning anything. It was as if he'd vanished, disappeared into the shadows from which he'd emerged. But I knew better. I knew that silence could be the most dangerous thing of all. Marco came to me with news that shattered the fragile peace we'd built. We found him, he said, his face grim. Vittorio. He's been meeting with Salvatore's people, the ones who got away. They're planning something big. Where? A warehouse in the industrial district. They've been stockpiling weapons, gathering men. They're going to hit us hard, Don Lorenzo. They're going to try to end this once and for all. How many men? At least 50. Maybe more. They've been recruiting for months. I sat back in my chair, the weight of the information pressing down on me. 50 men, armed and ready, coming to destroy everything I'd built. It was a war I'd hoped to avoid, a battle I'd prayed would never come. Don Lorenzo, Marco said, his voice urgent. We need to strike first. We need to hit them before they hit us. It's the only way. No, I said. No more violence. I won't go back to that. Then what are we supposed to do? Just sit here and wait for them to kill us? I'm going to talk to him again. Don Lorenzo, he's not going to listen. He's made his choice. Then I'm going to give him one more chance to change it. I left the estate that night, alone, unarmed. Enzo tried to stop me, his face pale with fear. You can't go back there, he said. It's too dangerous. They'll kill you. Maybe, I said. But I have to try. Then I'm coming with you. No. This is something I have to do alone. He grabbed my arm, his eyes blazing. You don't get to do this alone. You don't get to sacrifice yourself and leave the rest of us to pick up the pieces. If you're going, I'm going. I looked at him, this young man who'd grown into a hero, and I felt a surge of love so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. Fine, I said, but you stay behind me. No matter what happens, you stay behind me. The warehouse was dark when we arrived, the only light coming from the moon and the distant glow of the city. I could see the men, gathered in the shadows, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. It was an army, a force that could have destroyed anything in its path, and at the center of it all was Vittorio, his face hard, his eyes cold. Lorenzo, he said as I approached. I was wondering when you'd come. Vittorio, I said, stopping a few feet away. I came to give you one more chance. Walk away from this. Stop this madness before it destroys you. It's already too late for that, he said. I've made my choice. Then you're choosing to die? Because that's what will happen. You'll attack us, and we'll defend ourselves, and everyone here will die. Maybe, he said, but at least I'll die fighting for what I believe in. I stepped closer, my hands raised. I knew your father. He believed in the same things you believe in. He thought he was fighting for justice, for revenge, for the people he'd lost. But in the end, he was just fighting for himself. His hatred consumed him, Vittorio. It destroyed everything he loved. You're lying. I'm not. I watched him destroy himself, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the hate. And now I'm watching you do the same thing. Vittorio's hands trembled, the gun wavering. I could see the doubt in his eyes, the same doubt I'd seen in his father's eyes all those years ago. He was torn, caught between the hatred he'd been raised with and the truth I was offering him. You can walk away, I said. You can build a new life, a better life. You can be the man your father would have wanted you to be. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on mine. Then he lowered the gun, his shoulders slumping. I can't, he said. I can't let go of the hate. It's all I have left. That's not true, I said. You have yourself. You have your future. You have the chance to be something more. I reached out my hand, offering it to him. Come with me. Let me help you. He stared at my hand, his face torn. And then, slowly, he reached out and took it. The men around us gasped, their hands moving to their weapons. But Vittorio raised his hand, stopping them. Stand down, he said. Stand down. This is over. Vittorio, one of his men started. I said stand down. This is over. The men hesitated, then slowly lowered their weapons. The tension drained from the room, replaced by a silence that was almost peaceful. And then it happened. One of Vittorio's men, a man I didn't recognize, raised his weapon and fired. The bullet hit Vittorio in the chest, and he crumpled to the ground. No. I shouted, rushing to his side. No, no, no. I knelt beside him, pressing my hands against the wound. The blood was pouring out, staining his shirt, his face paling as the life drained from him. He was a traitor, the shooter said, his voice cold. He was going to betray us. He was going to save us, I said, my voice breaking. He was going to end this. Vittorio's eyes fluttered open, meeting mine. Lorenzo, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I should have listened. I should have. Don't speak, I said. Save your strength. We're going to get you help. It's too late, he said, a faint smile on his lips. But that's okay. I get to see my father again. That's okay. He closed his eyes, and I felt his body go slack. He was gone. Vittorio Romano, the son who'd been consumed by his father's hatred, was dead. The shooter was already dead, put down by Enzo's bullet. The rest of the men were surrendering, their weapons dropped, their hands in the air. But I barely noticed. I just sat there, holding Vittorio's body, tears streaming down my face that I'd failed him. I'd given him a chance, and I'd failed him. Enzo knelt beside me, his hand on my shoulder. It's not your fault, he said. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough, I said. It was never enough. No, he said. But it was something, and that's what matters. I looked at him, this young man who'd seen so much death and still found a way to believe in the goodness of people. He was right. It wasn't enough. But it was something. And I would carry that something with me for the rest of my life. The aftermath was chaos. The survivors of Vittorio's organization were taken into custody, their weapons confiscated, their plans dismantled. The war we'd feared had been averted, but at a terrible cost. That I spent the next few days in a daze, unable to shake the image of Vittorio's face, the moment when he'd finally chosen hope and been shot down for it. I'd given him a chance, and the world had taken it away. But I couldn't let that stop me. I couldn't let the darkness win. Enzo was my anchor, my reason to keep going. He was there every day, by my side, his presence steady and strong. He didn't try to fix me or offer empty platitudes. He just sat with me, in the silence, letting me grieve. Remember when I asked you why bad men hurt good folks? He said one evening, as we sat in the garden watching the sunset. I remember. I said, I think I finally understand, he said. The bad men hurt good folks because they don't know any better. They've been hurt themselves, and they don't know how to break the cycle. They think violence is the only answer. But it's not. No, he said. It's not. But sometimes, the people who try to break the cycle get hurt too. Like Vittorio. He was trying to change, and he got killed for it. That doesn't mean we stop trying, I said. That means we try harder. We find another way. He nodded, his eyes meeting mine. That's what you've always taught me. That's why I'm proud to know you. We sat in silence, the weight of the world pressing down on us. But there was also hope, a fragile, stubborn hope that refused to be extinguished. I'm going to keep fighting, I said. For Vittorio. For your father. For everyone who's been lost to this cycle of violence. I'm going to find a way to make it stop. I know you will, he said. And I'll be right there with you. I reached out and took his hand, holding it tight. Thank you, I said. For everything. Thank you, he said. For teaching me what it means to be human. The garden had never looked more beautiful. Spring had come early that year, painting the estate in shades of green and gold, the flowers blooming in colors so vivid they almost hurt to look at. I sat on the terrace, a cup of coffee growing cold beside me, watching the world wake up around me. It had been 2 years since Vittorio's death. 2 years of healing, of rebuilding, of learning to live with the ghosts that still haunted me. The cycle of violence that had consumed my life had finally been broken, but the scars remained. They always would. Enzo had moved into the estate full-time, his foundation now headquartered in the city, his work reaching more people than I'd ever imagined possible. He'd become a voice for the voiceless, a champion for the forgotten, a man who'd turned the pain of his childhood into a force for good. Chiara's children were growing up fast. Little Lorenzo was 8 now, his sister Sophia 6, their laughter filling the halls of the estate with a joy I'd never known. They'd grown up knowing nothing of the violence that had shaped their family's past, and I was determined to keep it that way. Maria still ran the household, though she'd long since stopped wearing the uniform. She was the matriarch now, the heart of the family, the woman who'd held us all together through the darkest days. And me, I was an old man, the last of a generation that had been defined by blood and betrayal. I'd spent my life building an empire, destroying my enemies, and losing myself in the process. But I'd found my way back. I'd found redemption. Enzo came out to the terrace, his sleeves rolled up, his hair disheveled. He'd been working in his study all morning, drafting proposals, reviewing documents, fighting the good fight. You should take a break, I said. You work too hard. I learned from the best, he said, sitting down beside me. You never stopped fighting. I stopped fighting the old way, I said. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. The old way was about destruction. The new way is about creation. He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. That's what I've been trying to do. Create something better. Something that lasts. And are you succeeding? I think so, he said. It's slow, and it's hard. And sometimes it feels like I'm not making any progress at all. But then I see someone who's been helped by the foundation, someone who's gotten their life back, and I know it's worth it. That's all that matters, I said. Knowing it's worth it. We sat in silence, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. The years had softened us both, smoothed the edges, filled the cracks. We were no longer the people we'd been, the scared child and the ruthless mob boss. We were something new, something better. I've been thinking, Enzo said, about the question I asked you all those years ago. Which question? The one about why bad men hurt good folks. I felt the words like a physical blow, the memory of that moment flooding back. The boy with the ancient eyes, his stuffed rabbit clutched to his chest, asking me the question that had changed everything. And what have you concluded? I asked. I think I finally understand, he said. The bad men hurt good folks because they've forgotten what they're losing. They've forgotten what it means to be human, to love, to care. They've turned themselves into monsters because it's easier than facing their own pain. And the good folks remember. They hold on to their humanity, no matter what. They keep fighting, keep hoping, keep believing that things can be better. And that's what makes them stronger in the end. I reached out and clasped his shoulder, feeling the strength in him, the goodness that had never been dimmed by all he'd seen. You've always been stronger than me, I said. I was the monster, and you were the one who showed me the way back. You were never a monster, he said. You were just a man who lost his way, and you found it again. I found it because of you, I said. Because you believed in me when no one else did. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Then he turned to me, and I saw the same intensity in his gaze that I'd seen in his eyes as a child, the same unshakable belief that the world could be made better. We're going to keep fighting, he said. We're going to keep protecting the good folks. We're going to make sure the cycle of violence ends with us. Yes, I said. We are. That evening, the family gathered for dinner. Maria had outdone herself, the table laden with food, the candles flickering in the fading light. Chiara was there with her husband and children, Marco with his wife, Enzo with a young woman he'd been seeing, a social worker who shared his passion for justice. And me, the old man, the patriarch, the man who'd spent his life fighting and finally found peace. Little Lorenzo came to me after dinner, his face serious, his eyes shining with a light that reminded me of the boy I'd met all those years ago. "Grandpa," he said, tugging on my sleeve. "Can I ask you something? Anything?" I said, "Why do bad men hurt good folks?" The question hit me like a wave, the echoes of the past washing over me. I looked at this child, this innocent who'd inherited the legacy of our family, and I felt the weight of everything I'd learned. "Because they've forgotten how to be good," I said. "They've forgotten what it means to love, to care, to protect. They've turned themselves into monsters because it's easier than facing the truth." "But that's sad," he said. "That's really sad." "Yes," I said. "It is. That's why we have to help them remember. That's why we have to keep fighting, keep hoping, keep believing that things can be better." He nodded slowly, his brow furrowed in thought. "So we're the good folks?" "Yes," I said. "We are." "Then I'm going to be good too," he said. "I'm going to protect people. I'm going to help them remember." I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. "You already are," I said. "You already are." Later that night, after the family had gone and the house was quiet, I sat alone in my study. The room was filled with the artifacts of my past, the pictures, the mementos, the reminders of the man I'd been. But I no longer felt the weight of those memories. I'd made peace with them. Enzo knocked on the door and entered, his face soft in the lamplight. "You should get some sleep," he said. "It's been a long day." "I will," I said. "In a little while." He sat down across from me, his eyes searching mine. "You're thinking about Vittorio, aren't you, and my father? And all the others?" "I'm thinking about them," I admitted. "But not with guilt. Not anymore. I'm thinking about what I can learn from them, how I can make sure their deaths weren't for nothing." "Were they?" I was quiet for a long moment, the question hanging in the air. Vittorio, who'd been consumed by his father's hatred. Victor, who'd chosen revenge over everything else. My own son, who'd died because I'd been too blind to see the truth. "No," I said finally. "Their deaths weren't for nothing. Because they taught me something. They taught me that the cycle of violence has to end. That the only way to break it is to choose love over hate, hope over fear. And you've done that." "I've tried," I said. "And I'll keep trying. For the rest of my life." He reached out and took my hand, his grip warm and steady. "Then that's enough," he said. "That's more than enough." We sat there, the silence a comfort rather than a burden. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the blood, the betrayal, the endless cycle of violence. And I thought about the boy who'd broken that cycle with a single question. Why harm good folks? Because the bad men had forgotten. And it was up to the good folks to remind them. The next morning, I woke early and walked through the garden. The dew was still on the flowers, the air fresh and clean. The estate was quiet, the family still asleep, the world at peace. I stopped at the spot where Enzo had first come to me, where he'd tugged on my sleeve and warned me about the bad men in the walls. I knelt down, touching the grass, feeling the earth beneath my fingers. "You saved me," I whispered. "You saved all of us." I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Enzo, his hair still rumpled from sleep, his eyes soft with emotion. "I thought I'd find you here," he said. "I come here every morning," I admitted. "It's my way of remembering, of being grateful." He sat down beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. "I'm grateful too," he said, "for everything you've done, for the man you became." "I became that man because of you," I said. "Because you believed in me." "We believed in each other," he said. "That's what made it work." We sat in silence, watching the sun rise over the garden. The light spread across the estate, touching the flowers, the trees, the house where our family slept. It was a new day, a new beginning, a new chapter in a story that had started with a child's question and ended with a man's redemption. "Enzo," I said, "do you remember what you asked me that day?" "How could I forget?" "I never gave you a proper answer. But I think I have one now." He turned to me, his eyes expectant. "What is it?" I thought about the question, the weight of it, the answer I'd spent years trying to find. And I realized that the answer had been there all along, hidden in the journey I'd taken, the people I'd loved, the man I'd become. "Bad men hurt good folks because they've forgotten their own humanity," I said. "But the good folks keep fighting. They keep hoping. They keep believing that things can be better." And that's what makes them stronger in the end. That's what you taught me, he said. That's what you taught me, I said. You were the one who reminded me what it means to be human. He reached out and took my hand, his grip warm and steady. Then we'll keep reminding each other, he said, for the rest of our lives. I squeezed his hand, feeling the bond that had carried us through the darkest times and into the light. The cycle of violence was broken. The past was behind us, and ahead of us was a future filled with hope. Thank you, I said, for everything. Thank you, he said, for showing me that monsters can become heroes. I looked out at the garden, at the world we'd built together, and I felt a peace I'd never known. The boy who'd asked me why the bad men hurt the good folks had become the man who'd shown me the answer to, and I would carry that answer with me for the rest of my life.